Welcome to the Mobile Home Park Mastery Podcast, where you will learn how to identify, evaluate, negotiate, perform due diligence on, finance, turn around, and operate mobile home parks. And now, here is your host, the fifth largest mobile home park owner in the United States, Frank Rolfe.
Prior to the advent of COVID in 2020, we were bringing in mobile homes, new mobile homes from factories, prepping the lot, putting on a deck, putting on the skirting, and the whole package altogether cost around $30,000 or so. Customers loved it. It was so affordable compared to the single family homes selling at a very big multiple of that price point. So you couldn't go wrong. You could bring in on almost any lot in America a $30,000 roughly single wide, and you could get it sold all day long. And then what happens? COVID comes in. They blame it on supply chain interruption. And the next thing you know, mobile home prices have doubled. Today, there's an entire science to selling $70,000 single wides, which is what they cost, new homes cost, in many markets. Yes, many parks are still selling those homes even at that bigger price point. This is Frank Rolfe with the Mobile Home Park Mastery Podcast. We're going to talk about the lessons we've learned from being an operator that's been selling lots of these $70,000 plus homes. So the first thing you have to know is that for a market to be able to sell a $70,000 home, one clue you can have as to its capability is to look at the price of the 1,000 square foot stick-built home. So if you go to Realtor.com, for example, and you put in the location of the park you're looking at buying or a park you already own, and pour over the listings, not the most expensive, not the biggest homes, but look at the ones that are kind of the single family alternative to a mobile home, which would be roughly something around 1,000 square feet. If you're in a market in which that 1,000 square foot single wide comes in at about $100,000 or so, you're in luck. We have found that is one factor that allows you to seemingly always have success selling these more expensive single wides. If, however, the 1,000 square foot single family home only sells for $40,000 or $30,000, then you probably will not do as well. Because someone who can buy a $70,000 single wide, who can qualify for that through a mortgage company, can typically also qualify for a stick-built home. And you've got to have a price advantage of that mobile home over that stick-built. Now, typically those 1,000 square foot stick-builts in most markets are in terrible condition. If you ever look at them, they're just awful. These are homes that were built back in the 50s and the 60s, and they really weren't well designed. They have horrible floor plans. They're very, very dated, and they're typically in awful condition. So I'm offering then a new mobile home that's in great condition with a good floor plan. And as long as I'm in that same price point with that advantage of about $70,000 versus $100,000 or so, typically I'll sell really well. So that's the first thing you've got to realize is you've got to compete. You have to have that price advantage over that comparable single family type of home. Another thing you got to know is how much of your park is comprised of seniors. Because often what happens in these parks with these more expensive homes is that the senior downscales from their stick-built home. They come to your park, and when they look at buying a new mobile home, whether it's $30,000 or $70,000, they just write a check. Or they write a check for half of it, and then they get a loan from a bank that they've been doing business with for years. And it makes the transaction so very simple, and they're not really that worried about the cost. Sure, they would have rather paid $30,000 or $40,000 rather than $70,000, but they can afford it. So it's kind of like if they go to the restaurant and the value meal is no longer available, well, they still eat there. They still buy the hamburger. So if you have a lot greater senior component, that also helps in determining whether your park can handle the $70,000 single wide or not. Another item is how many bedrooms you have. Because a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, which is a fairly standard mobile home size, that's very rare when it comes to multifamily. And in markets where you're competing head-on-head with apartments, finding a 3-bedroom, 2-bath apartment is like finding a needle in a haystack. So something which is kind of the standard, the norm of the mobile home park, the classic 14 or 16 by 76 3-2, is very much a rarity in the apartment world. So if you've got 3-bedroom homes for sale for $70,000, that's going to work. because 3 bedrooms are very hard to come by. If you've got 2-bedroom, $70,000 homes, it's much more difficult. Now, why is it such a big deal between the 2 and the 3-bedroom? Well, because if you have families with kids, typically the 3-bedroom is kind of the gold standard. They want to have everyone with their own bedroom, or if they have boys and girls, they want to have 1 bedroom for the girls and 1 bedroom for the boys. And it's just very, very hard to find. So the rarity, the scarcity of the 3-bedroom, 2-bath in the multifamily sector leads to enough demand that you should be able to then sell that 70,000 homes. So you have a lot of customers looking at that. Another observation on selling the $70,000 mobile home is you've got to have a really great salesperson. And you have to have a really good office to get the job done. Because people get much more discriminating when they're looking at writing a big check and taking out a big mortgage on a mobile home. We all know the mobile home industry has suffered from a negative stigma for decades now, probably never going to be corrected. So as a result, shoppers are very hesitant to buy the mobile home because they already have kind of a negative feel to it. Maybe a friends or family they fear will say, oh my gosh, you're kidding me. You paid $70,000 to buy a single-wide trailer in a trailer park? So to get them over the hump, to make them feel good about that purchase, you've got to have a salesperson with really, really good sales skills who gives them the confidence that they're making a good decision. And then you also have to have a very professional office. You know, the old days, you could sell a $30,000 single-wide out of your manager's mobile home, right there in their kitchen, around the dining table with cats running around in the background and the TV blaring. The demand was still so high, the price was so cheap, that people, despite the unusual surroundings of the sale, they'd still do it. But when you start getting to $70,000 single wide, people want to feel like they're buying something that's a quality product from professionals. So it's very important. Now, if you don't have an office in your park, if you say, well, gosh, I don't really have a real office to sell that home out of. Well, you can sell it out of the home too, right? Just make sure you meet in an environment that's professional. So if you get a mobile home, a new mobile home, and you put it in your park, you put it on the lot, there's nothing holding you back from getting a folding table and some chairs and putting those right there in the living room or in one of the bedrooms to be used as your sales office. Just don't let the customer have to go, as always classically occurred, to the manager's home to seal the deal. They're going to look around. The home will be probably very dated, maybe a little eccentric, and they'll think, oh gosh, I don't know. I don't know if this is really a smart move for me to spend $70,000 based on the environment that I'm seeing. Another option is to get a little portable building in some markets and make that your official office. Put a table and chairs in there and pop in a window air conditioner heater, and that should also do the trick. You can buy those kinds of little offices which come in on skids that look like little portable buildings for not a lot of money. And it will make all the difference in the world. Finally, if you're going to get a $70,000 home out the door, you've got to adopt some extremely sophisticated and reliable and aggressive sales tools to get enough volume of customers in to get the job done. Now, we originally pioneered the concept that it was roughly 3 calls to 1 showing and 3 showings to 1 application, because that's what we were seeing in the field. We just started tracking it. And today we sell so many homes because we do follow the science behind it. So how does that science work? Well, the first thing you have to do is you can't just let the manager answer the phone without being able to monitor what's going on. So you've got to forward your park's phone through a service like Who's Calling, or if you have a software like Rent Manager or their VoIP system. And what happens is when the customer calls, they get a recording saying this call is being recorded for customer service and da-da-da. And then it ports through. Then it tracks the incoming phone number. It also tracks how long the call was, and it also records the call. Now, the reason that's important is you've got to know how many calls are coming in, because that's the first building block to knowing the science of your sales. For most parks, to get a home out the door, you've got to bring in at least 9 calls. 3 calls for a showing, 3 showings for an application, 9 calls for an application. Now, if you're hitting those kinds of call numbers and you're not getting homes out the door, then something is falling apart of the process. And when you look through your Who's Calling log, you'll rapidly see what that is typically, and that's that no one's answering the phone. You'll notice that because you'll see each call has a duration of only a few seconds. So that's not going to work. So you got to make sure the manager is actually answering the phone. Number 2, you have to make sure that they understand the whole reason of answering the phone is to get someone to come into a showing. You cannot sell a mobile home over the phone. So the whole purpose is to encourage them to come down and look for themselves at the home. If you have a lot of calls and very few showings, it's safe to bet that the manager is not answering the phone and is not asking anyone to come down and take a look. Now, if you have the required number of calls and you're seeing a resulting number of showings, but you're still not getting any application, you have two options now. One is that the manager is doing a terrible job of sales, or the other is the home is simply not in keeping with the other market pricing. Maybe there's a park down the street where the price is far lower, and therefore, even though people are coming and looking, they're not making an application because of competitive market forces. Now, you can see what the manager is doing in two ways. Number one, by listening to those calls that are recorded through Who's Calling or VoIP. And number two, you can pay someone to go down and mystery shop. They can call as a customer locally in that market. You can get those kind of people off Craigslist, typically for $50. They can set up the showing time and then go. And then you can talk to them and say, what happened? And sometimes they'll say, well, I showed up, but they never did. Or I showed up and they didn't seem to understand the product or couldn't tell me anything about it. So you have to really start unlocking what's really going on with your park regarding getting these homes sold. You can also do exit interviews because you have those numbers captured of the people who called in. You can call them up and say, hey, I know you called about our home, but I don't think you bought it. What happened? And you'll learn a lot from talking to them. Now, once you know the science behind it, once you know you're monitoring the calls and the showings, to sell a $70,000 home will require significantly more lookers because now the home price point has basically doubled. So if before I was able to get a home out the door with 3 applications, now I might need 6, I might need 9, I might need 12. You'll still get there, but it may take a little bit longer to do it. And you've got to have very, very professional management along the way. Also, don't forget that even though single family new homes are costing, or single wide new homes are costing around $70,000, used ones don't. You can still buy $30,000 complete used homes for parks. So that is the fallback. But before you know you need that fallback, you've got to understand the science. You'll not be happy and you'll not feel like you've done a job well, or that you really have a handle on what's going on with these higher priced homes until you've given it your best shot. And to get the best shot, you've got to adopt science. This is Frank Rolfe, the Mobile Home Park Mastery Podcast. Hope you enjoyed this. Talk to you again soon.
Thank you for listening to the Mobile Home Park Mastery Podcast. Be sure to visit us at mhpmastery.com to subscribe to the show, read our show transcriptions, and access all of our great information on mobile home park investing.